Well, good morning. I'm Jeff Coleman.
And I'm Debra Pinkerton. Welcome to our half-hour special, a morning light conversation with actor, author, and Christian filmmaker Kirk Cameron.
Yes, that Kirk Cameron. In the 80s and 90s, Kirk Cameron graced the covers of teen magazines like Tiger Beat. Did you have a stack of Tiger Beats next to you?
I did have a stack. How about you?
I did not. He is best known for his portrayal of the mischievous Mike Seaver on the hit ABC television show Growing Pains.
Well, I sat down with Kirk earlier this month during his Strong Families, Strong Communities tour at Word of Life Church in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. We chatted about his journey of Hollywood fame to finding faith. Kirk, thank you so much for being with us
pleasure.
and spending this time with us this morning. Let's talk about your acting. When did it begin? I read it was age 9.
Yes, technically, I guess that's when it started. One of the roles that I played that I think has been the one that most people remember is Growing Pains.
Interesting story.
In the sitcom of the 1980s, I played Mike Seaver, who was this wisecracking teenager. It was mostly playing myself, only I had a team of writers following me around, giving me funny things to say.
Well, if that's your attitude, then I'm leaving.
And so my acting started before that, when I was 9 years old.
Okay!
And I was doing commercials. TV shows, guest appearances, and then Growing Pains started when I was 14, 15. And that lasted for 6 or 7 years. So that's what really gave me my start.
And how was it?
How was it? It was great. Yeah, it was fun. I never wanted to be an actor. As a kid, I wanted to go to school. My aspirations were to become a doctor, maybe a surgeon. I loved science and I loved math and I loved working with my hands. So the idea of playing parts and imaginary characters never even crossed my mind. But my mom had a friend whose son was one of the characters on a show called 8 is Enough. I don't know if you remember that show with Dick Van Patten back in the day. Well, his name was Adam Rich. He played the little boy with the bowl haircut, and he was my playmate at our apartment building. And so I went and auditioned for this agent. She signed me up, and I started working, and it turned out to be a great career. It's not one that I would recommend for a lot of children to grow up in Hollywood, in the spotlight, in the public eye, with all of the challenges to faith and morality, but God had a plan and he opened the right doors, closed the right doors, and so here I am today, able to do things that I'm really passionate about and I hope is helping a lot of families.
And I read that you were an atheist as a teenager during this program. What changed your heart?
So at the time that I experienced a conversion from atheism to Christian theism, I would have called myself an atheist, although I wasn't someone who strongly denied the existence of God. I guess I just didn't think much about it. And I kind of thought of it as a fairy tale and that smart people didn't believe in God. And then there was a pretty girl on the set of Growing Pains who invited me on a date and she told me to meet her at church. Well, I'm an agnostic / atheist, and I wasn't interested in God, but I wanted to see her, so I went and I heard the gospel. The pastor of that church was Chuck Swindoll, and so I heard a very compelling message. I was asking a lot of questions. I read a couple of good books, and I got answers that led me to a place of thinking that I might be wrong about this no God stuff. And so I remember sitting in my sports car parked on the side of the road at 17 years old, thinking about the fact that one day I would die and find out if there really is a God and a heaven. And I knew that if that was true, I wouldn't be going to heaven. And that I needed God to do something for me. And that was to forgive me and to show me the truth. And that began my spiritual journey and my curiosity about the Bible and about Christianity and investigating other religions, which made me very curious about apologetics and how well those could hold up to the toughest questions. And that was 35, 40 years ago. So I'm still here, and of all the things that I've ever done in my life, there is nothing that's impacted me more and nothing for which I'm more grateful than the Lord saving me.
That's what I was going to say. How has it changed your life?
Well, in every way. I think that you can't have a new heart without it having a totalizing effect on you. And I think that's the way that it's supposed to be. So it's changed my views on the economy. It's changed my views on marriage. It's changed my views on parenting, on morality, on science and the afterlife, and all kinds of things. And I think that's what Jesus said it was supposed to be. We get a new heart with new desires, and all of a sudden we're wanting to love God with all of our heart and love people rather than putting ourselves on the throne. And the worst kinds of people, I think, are religious hypocrites. So if the gospel has saved you but it hasn't changed you, I would question your salvation and say, wait a minute, you know a tree by its fruit. And if the fruit is sour and rotten and it's not changed to the fruit of love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness, faithfulness and self-control, that means you should examine the root and see what's really going on down there.
What a real transformation. I mean, here he was at the top of his game, and everyone knew him in Hollywood. I mean, he was famous, and then he just sort of walks away and says, I need to follow God. That's where my salvation is.
It's pretty cool to me to see that God had positioned people at every step of the way, that you, and how important preaching is. I mean, having a preacher who can unpack God's word in a relevant way like Chuck Swindoll, those kinds of pastors who are craftsmen make all the difference when you have especially creatives who think in pictures and need the scriptures to be vibrant for them and not cold. So exciting, a journey that he's been on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kirk says the Bible is the blueprint for the family. He believes in today's society, the church should influence the culture instead of the other way around.
Well, coming up on this special edition of Morning Light, Kirk Cameron is not just an actor, he's also an author.
Kirk recently wrapped up the Strong Family, Strong Communities church tour based on his book, Born to be Brave. We will share the details right after the break.
Welcome back. Well, for the last 2 years, actor and author Kirk Cameron has toured the country, meeting thousands of people who have asked the same question: how do we build strong families?
Kirk's Strong Families, Strong Communities tour is based on his book, Born to be Brave. The tour allows him to equip moms, dads, and grandparents with practical tools to apply God's word.
Well, it really is the meat and potatoes of the tour, Strong Family, Strong Communities. So it's the same content. I meet so many Christians who are fearful and afraid of the culture and what the future might be like, and some of them even almost have a fatalistic view, sort of a determined view that things can only get worse. And I say that we live in the greatest country on earth today because of biblicists, Christians, who had a view of the gospel that was comprehensively victorious and hopeful for their children. I mean, the Pilgrims got on a little wine ship designed to go port to port in England, and they crossed the Atlantic in it, landed 500 miles north of where they intended in the middle of winter in hostile circumstances, and they had no government, no power, no influence, no money. They had some Bibles and a few chickens, and they built the greatest nation on earth. The freest, most prosperous, generous nation the world's ever known. And here we are in 2025, hearing threats of war and seeing the price of eggs go through the roof, and we're crying in our Chick-fil-A soup, crying, get us out of here now, Lord. And I say, that's silly. I think that we can do so much better than that, and heroes of history can teach us, and Scripture can teach us lessons from legends that will make us courageous, full of faith, and the fruit of the Spirit to lead our children to the promised land of blessing and protection in the future. I want them to understand that God's given us some very powerful weapons to pose a real threat toward evil and darkness and help us to build up our families and communities to make them very, very strong. And I've come up with 3 C's to help memorize those 3. And those gifts are God's commandments, His community, and His calling. But if we can understand the power of the Word of God to transform all things, and then understand that we're not meant to go through the world alone, we're not Lone Ranger Christians, the power is in us working together as a tribe, as a community, as a band of brothers and sisters, the family of faith, and then understand that each of us has an individual calling within that one body. We can then be an unstoppable force for our kids throughout culture and history.
Got to be brave, got to be courageous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's part of what we're born with when we receive that second birth from heaven. Jesus said you must be born again, and that new birth bravery, that new creation courage, I think is built into every one of us, but it is often not activated if we have this sort of fearful, worrisome, anxious attitude about the future. We're just waiting to be rescued rather than drawing down and activating all of that courage and saying, wait a minute, I've been given the full armor of God. I've got the shield of faith and the sword of the Spirit. I've got these heroes behind me and the balcony of heaven. That cloud of witnesses cheering me on. Jesus says He's going to be with us, and He's promised us victory. And we ought to go and disciple all the nations. So what are we afraid of? And I want people to activate that courage.
What are we afraid of?
Well, we're afraid of COVID. We're afraid of our children not liking us. We're afraid that the government's going to shut down our churches if we don't do what they say. We're afraid of a whole lot of things. And fear is a wonderful motivator. If you can get people afraid, then you can control them. And that's what corrupt churches have done throughout the ages, just scare people to death or into obedience. Corrupt governments do the same thing. Bad parents do the same thing. But God says, don't fear man, just fear God. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge, and a healthy fear of God leads us into a loving relationship with Him, and then we don't need to fear anybody. We don't need to fear man. We don't need to fear woman. We don't need to fear death. We don't need to fear government or taxes or COVID or anything, because God hasn't given us a spirit of fear. He's given us a spirit of love and of power and of a sound mind.
I love that. I love that because He's putting right in the center of the conversation with you all of the things that, we say we're Christians, but we're afraid of all of these things.
That's right.
And here's the long list.
Right.
But to live fearlessly means you can share the gospel without feeling any threat from anyone or any government.
That is right. And you have to just step out in faith. You have to be brave. You have to be courageous.
And you can be cheerful.
That's right. Well, Kirk says ungodly forces have devastated American culture, but God has given believers a birthright of courage. If we choose to live in bravery, we can realign the nation with Christian values.
Coming up next on this special edition of Morning Light.
Hi, Brave Explorers. I'm Mr. Kirk. Welcome to my treehouse.
Kirk's transforming the landscape of children's entertainment. He will share details about his new television show, Iggy and Mr. Kirk. You are watching Morning Light on Lighthouse TV.
Welcome back. Bringing biblical values to life, Kirk Cameron's looking to shape the future of children's entertainment.
He's partnered with Brave Books for the brand new children's series, Iggy and Mr. Kirk. The goal, inspire young hearts and minds with important lessons about faith, friendship, and bravery.
I am just so excited about the opportunities that we have now as parents, of grandparents, to create projects that are going to be good for kids. And so much of what is out there for children in terms of books in schools and libraries are bent and twisted and perverted. They teach children essentially to deny God, dismiss their parents, and be embarrassed, if not disdainful, toward America. And they're learning this at a very young age through Disney shows and Nickelodeon shows, not only in books, but also children's television programming. And so what I've wanted to do is create a TV show that is actually good for kids, that parents can trust, that is entertaining them, igniting their imaginations, not just to keep them busy, but to actually help them develop their moral character and their spiritual depth. And I think that we've accomplished it. We have our new show called
Iggy and Mr. Kirk. Iggy and Mr. Kirk. Spend all day in the treehouse playing Iggy and Mr. Kirk.
as a modern-day Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood with lovable puppets like Sesame Street that is actually developing kids' brains and nurturing their hearts. And it's kind of cool to be here in Pennsylvania with Mr. Rogers Institute and all of that just right down the road. I play Mr. Kirk, of course.
Hi, brave explorers. I'm Mr. Kirk.
While I don't have a cardigan sweater and sneakers, I've got a leather jacket and boots. The show has very serious Mr. Rogers vibes to it. Mr. Kirk is a pilot, and he flew to an island called Freedom Island. This is an imaginary island where animals live, and freedom is being taken away from Freedom Island by Blackheart. And one of the animals there lost his parents, and so I adopted him, and he's an adorable green iguana named Iggy.
I guess that means that God didn't make a mistake with me.
He made a work of art with you. I'd say a true one-of-a-kind masterpiece.
And so we're raising him in our treehouse, in our backyard, and he is learning lessons that are relatable to every 5-year-old who's going to be watching the show. So he's got to learn about self-control and telling the truth and the importance of family. And there are a lovable cast of characters.
I want you to meet my very crafty cousin, Creative Lee.
Hello, brave explorers. I've heard so much about you. It's nice to finally meet you.
That he becomes friends with and that he's got to be wary of. For instance, there's a very mean and nasty vulture named Culture. And Culture's always lying to Iggy.
I wish. I mean, why? Of course.
Telling him that good things are bad and bad things are good. And he's got to learn from Mr. Kirk, and he's got to learn biblical wisdom from a supercomputer that he has there in the treehouse. What's true and what's false, what's good and what's bad, what should be avoided and what should be embraced and celebrated. So it's, again, it's classic TV for modern families, and every episode is wholesome and fun.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful, really, because with kids, they certainly are going to be having to make some very tough decisions.
Yeah, kids are making tough decisions, and that's one of the many things we love about Fred Rogers, is that he talked about difficult issues that kids have to navigate even though we don't think it's age appropriate, like death, divorce, sexuality, assassinations. I mean, Mr. Rogers dealt with this kind of thing. Racism, we think, well, we don't need to talk to our 4-year-olds about it. Well, yeah, we actually do, because when grandma dies, they wonder where she went. We need to deal with additional things like gender reality and all kinds of stuff today, because Disney and Nickelodeon and Scholastic Books are teaching our children false things about those topics. And so we need to counter it with the truth and really take that sacred duty of parenting seriously.
And my parents would call this type of program wholesome TV, ones that I should be watching.
Wholesome with some depth, and I think he's picking up a baton that Mr. Rogers is handing off in a way, because, look, Mr. Rogers is a pastor. Those episodes were deeply rooted in Christian values. It's a exciting enterprise, and well done, beautifully done.
Yeah, it is really well done. Well, you can watch the first few episodes of Iggy and Mr. Kirk by going to watchbrave.com. You can subscribe to watch all of season 1. Brave Books is the production company that is making the show.
And coming up, Kirk is going to share details about his family. We'll be right back after the break.
Hi, this is Kirk Cameron, and you're watching Morning Light on Lighthouse TV.
Well, Kirk Cameron is a family man. He's been married to his wife, Chelsea, for more than 3 decades. They've got 6 children and get this, one granddaughter.
And Kirk says his faith really helped him be a better husband and father. He also says biblical wisdom is absolutely critical for every area of family life, and that includes marriage, parenting, and grandparenting.
With regard to my wife, Chelsea, we also met on the set of Growing Pains. In fact, I met her even before that on the set of Full House, which is my sister Kirk Cameron's show. We were both on these hit sitcoms in the 1990s on ABC, which is super rare. But I met her there, and then she became my girlfriend on Growing Pains.
You like me?
Yeah.
So I married my on-screen sweetheart. Off-screen, we had developed this romance. We dated for about nine months to a year, and then we got engaged, got married, and we started a family a few years after that, and 6 kids, and we continued working together on television shows and movies. And so it's been great. And we worked on another sitcom together called Kirk.
Hi, I'm Kirk Hartman. I just graduated from college.
Where we were also love interests in that show. We worked on the Left Behind movies together.
So, how's my favorite flight attendant?
We worked on the Fireproof movie together. We've done all kinds of things together.
What is the biggest challenge as far as today's youth? And how do parents guide them through it? Because there's so many things distracting them and taking them away from the message.
Yeah, we still have PTSD from the teenage years with all 6 of our kids. Graduating high school and getting cars and going to college and getting married, all happening at the same time. It's a very expensive chapter in our parenting book. Kids are facing all sorts of the same challenges we've always faced, but I think they're just new versions of them. So when we would face peer pressure as kids, like, oh, my friends, they think I'm stupid, or they think I'm ugly, or they think that I'm dumb. Well, now kids have thousands and thousands of strangers who are laughing at them because of a picture they posted or something that they said. And so it's magnified, and they've almost created, maybe they have created a false virtual world that doesn't really exist with followers that they've never met and whose opinions matter greatly but shouldn't matter at all, because they're actually not in their life in terms of a real world like you and I.
Right.
And so this kind of FaceTime is rare with a lot of kids. Even when they're sitting in the same room, they'd rather be, connecting with somebody else. And so I think kids have a tremendous need to understand connection and relationship with people. And I think one of the greatest tragedies is lazy parents, or distracted parents, or parents that have ambitions outside of their home that take priorities over the raising of their children. So that's not to say that men shouldn't work or that women shouldn't work. That's not to say that all video games are evil. That's not to say that that money is bad. But when the love of fame and popularity and money, or the comfort of sitting on the couch and playing games, or trying to find your identity in your business skills or your athletic skills or whatever, to the neglect of the next generation, is tragic. And many of us, we just have to do a personal inventory and say, oh God, are my priorities straight? I mean, it needs to be like love God, family first, be kind, tell the truth, work hard. And I think in that order, it's got to be identity and purpose according to God's standards first. And I believe that starts with your family.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us
my
this
pleasure.
morning.
Thank you.
Great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Well, Kirk says his faith helped him become a better husband and father.
He also mentioned the book Shepherding a Child's Heart, written by Ted Tripp. Kirk says it's a biblical handbook for parenting your kids. Certainly, this was a wonderful conversation with Kirk, and he really told us, everything how his life journey is from, being a Hollywood actor and now, trusting in God.
And you can trust him. The big message, my big takeaway from all this is you can trust God through all the seasons of your life.
Absolutely. We want to thank you for watching this very special conversation with actor, author, and Christian filmmaker Kirk Cameron.
Go check on your neighbors, and we'll see you again very soon.